December 7, 1941, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto launched the most devastating surprise attack in American history. 2,400 lives lost in under 2 hours, 8 battleships destroyed, a nation shocked into war. But here is what almost nobody knows. The man who planned Pearl Harbor had spent years warning Japan that attacking America would lead to their total destruction. And he was right. This is the story of the Admiral who orchestrated his own nation's doom while seeing exactly what was coming. To understand how someone plans an attack while knowing it will ultimately fail, we need to go back to 1919. A young Japanese naval commander named Isoroku Yamamoto arrived at Harvard University to study. But Yamamoto did not just study. He investigated America with the thoroughness of a military intelligence officer, because that is exactly what he was. He traveled to Texas oil fields and watched production that exceeded Japan's entire national output. He toured Detroit automobile factories, where single assembly lines manufactured more vehicles in a week than Japan produced in a year. He stood before Pittsburgh steel mills that could outproduce all of Japan's foundries combined. The industrial disparity was not close, it was overwhelming. But the numbers alone did not explain what troubled Yamamoto. He saw something in the American character itself that his fellow officers back home refused to acknowledge. Americans possessed an almost reckless confidence in their ability to solve problems through sheer industrial will. He saw it in packed baseball stadiums, heard it in jazz clubs, felt it in the energy of factory workers who believed they were building the future. Yamamoto wrote letters home that his colleagues found almost treasonous. He described America as a sleeping giant, powerful beyond measure but unaware of its own strength. And he warned repeatedly that if Japan ever woke that giant through aggression, the result would be annihilation. When he returned to Japan in the late 1920s, he continued making these arguments in military councils. War with America would be suicide. The industrial gap was insurmountable. Japan might win battles, but could never win the war. Nobody wanted to hear it. Throughout the 1930s, as Japan invaded Manchuria and China, as militarists seized control of the government, Yamamoto kept warning, and he kept being ignored. His colleagues called him defeatist. Some whispered he had been corrupted by his time in America. But Yamamoto had not lost his nerve. He had gained uncomfortable, undeniable knowledge. By summer 1941, Japan faced an impossible choice. America had imposed an oil embargo in response to Japanese aggression. Without American oil, Japan's military would collapse within months. The options were to abandon the China campaign or seize oil fields by force, which meant war with America. Submission was unthinkable to the military government. That left war, and the leaders who had dismissed Yamamoto's warnings came to him with an order. As commander-in-chief of the combined fleet, he was to develop a strategy for war with the United States. Yamamoto could have resigned. Some officers did, rather than participate in what they viewed as national suicide. But resignation would accomplish nothing. Someone else would take command, someone who had not seen American factories and oil fields, someone who might believe Japan could win a conventional war against the United States, someone whose ignorance might make the disaster even worse. So Yamamoto made a decision that would define him forever. If Japan was determined to fight, he would give them the only strategy with even the slimmest chance of success. He would not fight the war his colleagues wanted. He would strike first, strike hard, and try to buy enough time for Japan to seize the resources it needed before American industry could mobilize. The plan was unprecedented. Japan would attack the United States Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Not at some distant outpost, at the heart of American naval power. The goal was not conquest, it was time. If Yamamoto could cripple American naval strength in a single blow, Japan might have 6 months, perhaps a year, to capture the Dutch East Indies oil, Malaya's rubber, and Southeast Asia's resources. Then, maybe, just maybe, America would negotiate rather than fight across the Pacific. There exists a quote attributed to Yamamoto that historians have debated for decades. According to some sources, he told Prime Minister Konoe that he could run wild for 6 months or a year, but had no confidence for the second or third year. Whether he said those exact words matters less than this truth. Everything in his subsequent actions proved he believed it. Yamamoto was designing Operation Z under no illusions about Japan's ultimate chances. He was buying time with a gambler's desperate hand, knowing the odds were against him.
If you appreciate this examination of history's most complex decisions, I would be grateful if you subscribed. These stories reveal how knowledge and power can diverge, and there is always more to explore. December 7th, 1941, 7:48 in the morning. The first bomb fell on Wheeler Field. 353 Japanese aircraft struck Pearl Harbor in 2 waves. Torpedo bombers came in so low their propellers nearly touched the water. Dive bombers plunged from altitude with devastating precision. The battleship Arizona exploded with such force the blast was felt across Oahu. The Oklahoma capsized, trapping over 400 men inside. In less than 2 hours, 8 battleships were destroyed or crippled, 188 aircraft destroyed, 2,403 Americans killed. When reports reached Yamamoto aboard his flagship, officers around him celebrated. But according to those present, Yamamoto's expression showed something closer to dread than triumph. Because there was a catastrophic problem. The American aircraft carriers were not in port. Enterprise had been delayed by weather. Lexington was delivering aircraft to Midway. Saratoga was on the west coast. All 3 carriers had survived by accident. Yamamoto knew immediately what this meant. The attack that was supposed to buy Japan a year had bought, at best, months. But even that was not the worst consequence. Another famous quote haunts Yamamoto's legacy, though historians debate whether he actually spoke it. "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." The phrase appears in film but lacks contemporary documentation. Yet whether Yamamoto said it or not, he had predicted exactly this outcome in his pre-war warnings. Before Pearl Harbor, America was divided. Isolationists held powerful positions. Most Americans opposed involvement in foreign wars. Pearl Harbor vaporized that resistance overnight. Within days, recruiting stations were overwhelmed with volunteers. Within weeks, factories converted to war production at a staggering pace. Within months, the United States was outproducing the rest of the world combined. Yamamoto had warned that a surprise attack would unite American resolve and transform American industry into an unstoppable machine. He had been ignored. Now he was watching his own prophecy fulfill itself with methodical precision. For 6 months, Yamamoto's gamble appeared to work. Japanese forces swept across the Pacific. Hong Kong, Manila, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies all fell. By spring 1942, Japan controlled an empire from Burma to the Gilbert Islands. But those surviving American carriers haunted Yamamoto. As long as they existed, American naval power could regenerate. In June 1942, he planned what he intended as the decisive battle near Midway Atoll, designed to lure the American carriers into a trap. It went catastrophically wrong. On June 4th, American dive bombers caught the Japanese carriers at the worst possible moment, their decks crowded with aircraft being rearmed. In 5 minutes, 3 carriers were fatally wounded. By day's end, 4 of the 6 carriers that struck Pearl Harbor were sinking. Yamamoto commanded from 300 miles away, too far to influence events spiraling out of control. When the reports arrived, he ordered retreat. The battle he had planned as Japan's triumph became instead the turning point of the
planned to
Pacific
rest on a
War.
2,000-yard
The
beach.
6 months he had promised
First
to
and
run
fifth will
wild
pivot
were
left
over.
and head toward
Everything
Bloody Nose
after was
Ridge.
grinding retreat
The seventh
as
will pivot right
American
to secure that
industrial
flank.
power asserted itself with crushing inevitability. By early 1943,
The airstrip
Yamamoto
is
was
straight ahead.
exhausted. The knowledge that every prediction he had made was being validated
Jap
in
mortar
blood
and
had
artillery
aged
fire
him
is heavy.
beyond his 59 years. On April 18th, he decided to visit Japanese
The first wave
forces
is
in the
pinned
Solomon
down.
Islands, despite staff protests about American air
20
control.
landing vehicles are knocked
The
out.
itinerary had to
But
be
we're on the
transmitted
beach.
by radio. The Americans intercepted it, deciphered it, and at the highest levels of government made a decision. The man who planned Pearl Harbor would be killed. 18 P-38 Lightning fighters took off from
Carrier
Guadalcanal
planes
before
strafing Jap
dawn.
positions.
At 9:35 in the morning, they found their target over Bougainville.
Casualties
Captain
the first
Thomas
day.
Lanphier positioned behind
92
Yamamoto's
killed,
bomber and opened
1,100
fire.
wounded,
The aircraft tried to
58
evade,
missing.
but bullets ripped through the fuselage. It crashed into the jungle and exploded.
Veterans, these Marines.
Japanese search
Guadalcanal,
parties
New
found
Britain.
Yamamoto still
This
in
is their
his
third
seat,
show.
still upright, still
Well-trained,
holding his sword.
well-equipped,
He
expert
had
with
been
rifles,
killed
grenades,
instantly. The
flamethrowers,
man
mortars,
who planned
artillery.
Pearl Harbor, who warned his
15
country
million
it would
rifle and
lead to
machine gun
disaster,
bullets,
who proved
90,000
unable
mortar
to
shells,
prevent what he foresaw,
150,000
died
field
on a
artillery
remote
shells,
island
and
killed by a nation he
125,000
understood
hand
better
grenades will
than
be
his
presented
own
by the Marine
government
Corps
ever
to
did.
Imperial Japan.
Did Yamamoto regret
With the
Pearl
compliments
Harbor?
of hometown
That
USA.
question has generated decades of debate, but perhaps we have been asking it incorrectly. Regret suggests a choice freely made and then reconsidered. Yamamoto's choice was never free. By the time he received orders to plan for war, Japan's course was already set by decisions above his authority. The real question is whether he ever believed Pearl Harbor would accomplish what his government hoped. The answer is unambiguous: no. From his first warnings in the 1920s through his final years of command, Yamamoto maintained the same position with remarkable consistency. War with America was unwinnable. Japanese industry could not match American production. Surprise attacks might win battles, but lose American resolve and lose the war. Everything Japan hoped to gain would be lost in the inevitable counteroffensive. He was right about all of it. Pearl Harbor bought Japan 6 months of expansion, followed by 3.5 years of grinding defeat. The battleships destroyed were obsolete anyway. The carriers that survived became instruments of Japan's destruction. The oil fields seized were useless without tankers to transport crude, and American submarines sank those tankers faster than Japan could build them. Every prediction
Here's the
Yamamoto
airstrip,
made
focus of the
came
battle.
true with
That's
mathematical
Bloody Nose Ridge in
precision.
the background,
The
1,000 yards
tragedy
away.
of Yamamoto
Up
is
there, the
not
Jap
that
is
he
heavily
planned Pearl
entrenched in a
Harbor
honeycomb
and
of
regretted
caves
it.
and
The
fortified
tragedy
positions.
is that he understood
That's where he'll make his
exactly when
final
it would
stand.
unleash and proved unable to prevent it. He could see the future with clarity. He could articulate it to anyone who would listen, but he could not change it. The momentum of history, the pride of his nation,
Meanwhile, over
the
on Angar
machinery
Island,
of
6
war,
miles away,
all of it was
soldiers of the
larger than
81st
one
Army
man,
Division are
no
landing.
matter how brilliant,
This is their
no
first
matter
engagement.
how prescient.
Like the Marines,
Isaruku
their combat
Yamamoto was
strength is around
trapped by the
15,000
same
men.
force that traps us all.
Reinforcements and supply
The knowledge
echelons
that
double that
seeing
figure.
disaster coming
It required
and
20
preventing
transports to
disaster
bring the
from
81st to
arriving
this beach.
are two entirely different things. If this examination made you reconsider what you thought you knew about Pearl Harbor,
Again,
I
the pattern
welcome
of
your
war in the
thoughts in the
Pacific.
comments. And if
Landing
you want
craft,
more
tanks,
explorations
assault
of
waves
the
driving
moments
in to
when
establish a
knowledge
beachhead.
confronts power, when brilliant minds prove powerless against forces they understand perfectly, then subscribe. History is never as simple as we wish it were. Thank you for watching.